Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now after an over 2 week hiatus. Yes, I was gone over the holidays. Yes, I had my laptop with me, but I kind of wasn't in the mood for streaming. So here I am back covering CES, covering what all of the plethora of announcements mean for Apple. Today is going to be a relatively short stream, at least in comparison to the amount of information we are covering. That's obviously because we're talking about AMD's and NVIDIA's announcements today. NVIDIA just had their presentation for me literally tonight, so at 3 a.m. in the morning, and here I am basically 12 hours later covering it. AMD came in a little bit before that, so even with that being said, others have already obviously covered that, from Hardware Unboxed, Linus Tech Tips. We might actually look into some LTT content today because they are pretty good at covering this kind of stuff pretty quick. And obviously, while this is obviously not an Apple exclusive channel, this is an Apple focused channel. So we are going to cover a lot of the announcements from the lens of what do they mean for Apple, right? What do they mean for the M4 family, including the yet to be announced M4 Ultra chip? What do they mean when Apple finally announces M5? Some of it just means, oh, is Apple screwed or not, right? Sometimes things don't need too deep of an analysis. So thank you to anyone who's joining. I know the YouTube algorithm is going to spank my ass for being gone for so long, but I appreciate anybody who's joining. Steve, one of our YouTube channel members, already saying, glad to see you're back. Thanks for the €2.49. And I believe you were Oni-chan or something like that. Because I cannot read your name, saying good evening to you, good sir. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you to anyone who will join or not, will watch the video afterwards. I know that's kind of how it goes. Yeah. Without further ado, let's actually get started right into some of the hot stuff. And to me, I believe for us, the more important thing is actually the AMD announcement, because AMD is more competitive in laptops as a whole. AMD makes both CPUs and GPUs. NVIDIA, they make GPUs, and yes, they sometimes combine them with ARM chips. But then, of course, laptop manufacturers put their dedicated GPUs into laptops that have either an AMD or an Intel CPU. At that point, though, the power consumption difference, even with like a 60 series GPU, is usually so far removed from what Apple offers with the MacBook Airs, with most of the MacBook Pros, except for the highest end Max versions, that those are very incomparable devices with very different battery life, very different cooling requirements, and probably for the most case, a very different customer base. Because if you're going to buy a $4,000 laptop for gaming, you're probably accepting of a lot of compromises from having like a dedicated GPU inside that simply don't vibe well with buying a MacBook Pro that obviously doesn't game too well, right? Ideally, you would probably want something as thin and light as a MacBook Pro rather than some of the chunky gaming hardware, or you would want the great battery life that similar thin and light in the x86 space can achieve. But you kind of cannot have all of that and great gaming, because unfortunately macOS's gaming support is still rather limited. So while obviously the RTX 5090, a $2,000 graphics card with 32 gigabytes of GDDR7 memory, is very interesting, and so is its mobile counterpart, a 24 gigabyte RTX 5090 mobile that is basically the desktop RTX 5080 with higher density memory modules. While all of those announcements are very interesting and very industry shaking, they are channels entirely dedicated to covering desktop grade hardware. Obviously, we do cover desktop grade hardware on this channel, but laptops, I will admit, are a little bit more near and dear to me. I personally love tablets more than any other form factor, so it's a little bit more here where it's at for us, which is the Ryzen AI Max family, because yes, we have covered the stupidity of the AMD Ryzen AI naming already in previous videos, and now we have the Max family for it. But it's not just ending with the Max, right? It's not Ryzen AI Max 395. No, 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 no. We have the Ryzen AI Max 380, Pro only, okay. Ryzen AI Max 385, Ryzen AI Max 390, and Ryzen AI Max Plus 395. And yes, the Pro moniker is somehow included. Some type it directly as Ryzen AI Max Plus Pro 395. Some just say, oh, it's the overall Pro family. Technically, there should also be like 9s here because it's the highest end family, and usually AMD structures their Ryzen naming according to 9, 7, 5s, and 3s. So 90 and 80 series would be 9s, or maybe the 80 would be a 7 here. But I guess they didn't want to add another number in here because with all these letters and sub brandings, it already looks stupid AF. Yeah, so in theory, we could have laptops that come with a chip called the AMD Ryzen AI Max Plus Pro, or no, it would be the AMD Ryzen AI 9 Max Plus Pro 395, or some version of that that is similarly confusing. Look, if you actually want one of these chips, look at like the Max branding. The Max Plus is the only branding that noticeably differs, which is hilarious to me because you already have the number in here. Like, did you really need the plus? Like, you already have the Max 390, right? So you add some CPU cores, you add some GPU cores, you change a little bit on the boost clock. Obviously, with a few more cores comes a little bit more extra cache. Why did you need the plus in here? Jesus Christ, like AMD has managed to piss me off together with Dell so much since CES started. In general, the amount of rebrandings we're getting so early in 2025 is just horrendous. AMD rebranded their Radeon GPUs. Now we get the 9070s and 70 XT. RX 9070 and 9070 XT. Now they have this stupid AI shit extended branding for their laptop chips. They also have horrendous naming for their 3D V-Cache parts on laptop that go up to like the 9955HX3D or shit like that, if I remember any of this correctly at this point, because I am coming in from work, so I apologize if my head is filled a little bit more with dermatology rather than AMD branding, but that's neither here nor there. Let's actually focus a little bit on what's good and what's interesting and some stuff that is not so good about these laptop parts and what they mean for Apple. By the way, this might have been a long intro. I didn't think it was all an intro, but apparently I forgot to do the YouTube jazz. To anybody here, to anybody who will be joining or who will be watching afterwards, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it out to anybody who you think might enjoy it, and comment. You guys know I love interacting with a lively live chat. I know today I didn't pick like the exact greatest starting time for a stream, but hey, I'm going to be here for around 1.5 hours, so hopefully more of you can join and then join the chat later on. And of course, you can become a channel member. Shout out to Steve, Maximus, and Angelica, who are all MarkTech Pro Max supporters right here on YouTube. You can also become a supporter over on Patreon. We also have some free tiers over there, or one free tier to be more concrete, just so you can connect to me outside of Twitter, YouTube. You can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky, all that fun stuff. So however you want to support this channel, directly, indirectly, just watching and liking these videos, it's all very much appreciated. So now, without further ado, I believe I'm saying that for the third time today, let's actually analyze the AMD Ryzen AI Max family, which they call the most advanced mobile x86 processor ever created. It has up to 40 RDNA, first disappointment of the day, 3.5 compute units. So unfortunately, while they actually completely cut out the RDNA 4 announcement from their CES keynote, they did talk to YouTubers and basically tech sites about it. So we know RDNA 4 is coming sometime in Q1. Seems more like a March thing or something like that, like something for the end of the quarter, but also seems like they are slowly finally moving away from including RDNA 3.5 everywhere, but this is like the last hurrah. Unfortunately, I wish this was an RDNA 4 design, especially with all the promises of increased AI performance on RDNA 4. Just a more better core, I guess, for rasterization, and significantly improved ray tracing, which we know is true already from the PlayStation 5 Pro, which already includes some RDNA 4 technology, and some good stuff, up to 16 Zen 5 cores. Now, it should be noted, this is not, as far as I know, this is not like the M4 Max, right? It doesn't have everything on one die. It's all on one chip. So as far as I know, they're basically chiplets communicating with each other. We have a GPU chiplet, and we have up to 2 8-core chiplets for the CPU, which is basically taking their desktop parts from that and combining it all into one. You can see the chip here coming together. Pretty complicated design. Don't know what the latency penalty will be for any of the components. Probably not too high. I mean, usually GPUs are even not directly on one die with the CPU in the desktop space anyway. So if anything, it will probably result in lower efficiency, which isn't too great because everything suggests that this is a TSMC 4 nanometer part, which obviously isn't a bad node. But 3 nanometer has now been out for quite a bit. Now everyone on the mobile side is on N3E. And unfortunately, both AMD and NVIDIA have come out at CES with 4 nanometer parts. Even the RDNA 4 promised GPUs that are launching a few months from now, potentially, are TSMC 4 nanometer parts. And of course, so is the RTX 5000 series. Probably has to do with the fact that TSMC dropped the price on 5 nanometer, and 4 nanometer is part of the 5 nanometer family. 3 nanometer is still very expensive. Probably doesn't have as great of supply as these AI behemoths would like, especially NVIDIA. But this is a mobile part. This is a part that at this point has to compete with the Apple M4 generation, which is based on the second generation of 3 nanometer. So that's a little bit iffy. But hey, I guess they had already their Zen 5 cores and stuff like that. I know some leakers have said, especially Moore's Law is that they might have been redesigning it to be 3 nanometer, but I would be very surprised why they didn't mention it on stage. So I might be wrong in that regard. They actually didn't talk too much about the exact layout and stuff like that. They didn't go into great architectural breakdowns of how they achieve the inter-chiplet communication, because usually their chiplets are CPU chiplets that communicate with each other, but now obviously obviously there is the GPU component here. They did talk about memory bandwidth, which we are going to cover here, which honestly was the most disappointing part to me, beyond this obviously skipping the latest potential node. But yeah, obviously I've talked a lot. I've talked very fast. Let's talk about Strix Halo. Because yes, including to Fire Range and all those different sub-brandings, this is the premium version of Strix. Strix, of course, being their like mobile chips right now for this generation, and Halo, SoCs to be more precisely. They obviously have mobile CPUs and mobile GPUs, but their mobile SoCs for this gen are called Strix. Strix Point are the lower end versions, and Strix Halo is now this high end version. So again, so many different sub brandings to consider. If you actually want to explain to anyone, you would at this point need like a 8-level decoder ring and shit like that. Like, what is part of Strix? What is part of Halo? What is part of Ryzen AI? What is part of Max? What is part of Max Plus? It's all very, very inconvenient, unfortunately. What even is this? Let's reload the website. Okay. So, AMD just announced the Halo, obviously, that's when the article was written, and of its Strix Point mobile processors combining Zen 5 CPU cores, RDNA 3.5 integrated graphics, and an NPU. That NPU obviously is where the AI stats are coming from. Obviously, if you have 40 compute units of a decently modern GPU, you would probably want to give it a lot of that AI part of an AI task, because it will be faster, right? Ideally, you would be able to fully combine them, so that will be up to see in benchmarks and real world tests. Like, is the bandwidth enough to like handle the CPU, the GPU, the NPU all combined? So will be interesting to see. So we do have the 385, the 390, and the AI Max Plus 395. And then that's the pro-only shit with some business related. I don't even want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. So we suspected the Strix Halo launch for a while now. Yeah, shout out here again to a leaker called Moore's Law is Dead, who has been covering Strix Halo basically 2 years in advance, even like creating like a die shot that is very similar. Obviously, you can configure it differently based on which one you choose. 40 is the highest CU count, compute unit count for the GPU. That's for the Max Plus 395 version. I find that a little bit disappointing because, quite honestly, I think that 16 cores, like desktop cores here, are pretty overdone. And then again, I think that this pro only bullshit. So I guess pro is like their business counter, is their business sub branding of this AI Max sub branding. So I guess 6 cores is what they will sell only to businesses. This is for consumers. And I just find it weird because I doubt most consumers would want like 16 power hungry Zen 5 cores, but I can easily see why a gamer would want like 32 compute units. Would want even the full 40 compute units, even combined with 8 cores, right? Now, 12 cores is a little bit complicated with AMD. 12 cores usually means 2 chiplets with 6 cores. That results usually in a lot of necessary communication back and forth, especially in games that actually utilize like more than 12 threads. So I kind of see why they really want to make that 16 core version the premium one. 88 plus 40 might have looked a little unbalanced, but it probably would have been pretty good, especially since they could have also used potentially like 3D cache on that 8-core chiplet and just really, really optimize the shit out of it. Less transistors, less like die size would have been pretty good for efficiency. 8 cores is probably more than enough. I wish they would finally move beyond 8 cores on one chiplet, to be honest, like 10 or something like that, preferably 12. But alas, they are not doing so right now. So seems like we'll have to wait until the next big like core doubling to actually get more cores per chiplet. So we have 16 Zen 5 cores. Obviously, Zen 5 is a proven thing by now in both good and bad ways. It's basically Zen 4, but with slightly higher IPC in some ways. Like it has a little bit more cache here and there. In some tasks, it's like 5% or better now, finally. Like it used to be 5% or less when it launched, but now with some software fixes, it has definitely improved a bit. That being said, it's not as efficient as some people originally claimed, especially not if you actually allow it to hit its highest clocks. So thankfully, we are here far away from like the 5.7 gigahertz that like a desktop 16 core part would be allowed to hit. So hopefully, maybe if you like limit it to maybe really 5.1 gigahertz only on one core and only very occasionally, and then the rest of the cores really run more like the 3 gigahertz range, maybe it could be pretty efficient. But that's a lot of silicon on one chip to handle. And we know Windows doesn't like SoCs as much as even Linux, but certainly than Mac OS. So yeah, let's see what the final result will be. They all have a 50 TOPS AI engine inside. They have crazy configurable TDP ranges, ranging from 45 to 120 watt. And might I ask, AMD, what the actual F is the Ryzen AI Max 380 with 6 Zen 5 cores, 16 3.5 compute units. Okay, at least the clock speed isn't bad, but like massively cut down total cache. What the actual F is this chip ever doing, ever hitting 120 watts? Like, I understand probably nobody will configure it this way, but why should we ever care about this kind of TDP range? I know you're primarily communicating here more with the manufacturers, right? But like what like it's so stupid because right now consumers are already getting their first impression of what these chips do, right? And yeah, I know this one is for businesses, but why can a chip with half as many CPU cores hit the same power consumption, right? And why can a chip with less than half as many cores and less than half as many GPU cores hit the same power consumption? Like, why? At least give this like a low range of 35 watts, or I don't know. Like, I guess the 4.9 gigahertz top speed is really like still kicking in. But damn, this is such a stupid TDP range. And this is why also treating all of this as like one family, even. Why is this a Max chip? This looks more like Strix Point rather than Strix Halo. So again, I know that Strix Point is like a mix of Zen 5 and Zen 5C, and here everything is like regular Zen 5, not efficiency focused cores, right? But at this point, really, like if it's like, imagine if Apple had like a Max chip, right? That was basically like a little bit between an M4 and an M4 Pro, right? Right now, but they actually called it a Max chip still, right? It's that stupid. So these different levels of sub branding are so freaking bad, and I really hope that companies find a way to just say, you know what, this laptop has like 2 chip options. It's easy to see which one is the bigger, more expensive one. Um, there probably are also going to be different like RAM limits depending on like I assume most people probably wouldn't want 120 gigabytes of RAM on like a 385. At that point you would probably go 390 or 395. So hopefully it will be clear to the actual customers buying it, but right now it's a really big mess. Now, let's actually look at the performance claims here. Now, this is them comparing it to Arrow Lake, I believe. At this point, I'm forgetting all the names. This is the Core Ultra 9 288V, so that would be a 4 performance, 4 efficiency cores, and it would be 8 GPU compute units as far as I know. So obviously, it is a lot faster. This is close to 4 times the GPU compute here. On wait, this is one thing, like okay, so I guess Cinebench is then the CPU benchmark here. So I have no idea what this means, to be quite honest, because obviously the compute unit increase would suggest like a 4x increase. The CPU change, well, there are 4 times as many P cores, but then Arrow Lake also has E cores, but then Arrow Lake is also limited to much lower TDPs, so it's hard to say. Alas, it's easy to say that it's going to be faster than Arrow Lake, but also going to consume a lot more more power. I also looked into this, so thank you to my Twitter friends, including Jimmy James UK and some others who looked into this. I honestly didn't know that NT for Cinebench just means multi-threaded, and obviously the N isn't an M here, but the N is like the variable, right? So the number of cores, basically. So I guess that's still a CPU benchmark for some reason. Maybe the CPU here scales better than the GPU. One part of it is that it has 256 gigabytes per second of a memory bandwidth. So that's actually only double, basically, of what Arrow Lake is delivering. And that's actually less than what the M4 Pro has, that has around 270. And then the M4 Max with its massive 512-bit bus going all the way up to 540. So that's a little bit funny to me. I think the more interesting comparison for us as Apple customers, and this is where for the first time in half an hour I actually get into what does this mean for Apple. They're making comparisons here to the M4 Pro. M4 Pro, by the way, I've shown you the TDP ranges here, right? 45 to 120 watts. Like, look, I know the M4 Pro got the TDP increase basically because it has potentially so many performance cores, right? Up to 10 performance cores, right? And 4 efficiency cores. Massive increase over the M3 Pro here. So while combined CPU and GPU usage on the M4 Pro most likely would push you beyond 45 watts here, this chip, if doing combined CPU and GPU, is definitely far above. 16 Zen 5 cores, we know the power metrics of over 100 watts from the desktop parts. Now, this is even me already correcting a little bit for the fact that we have slightly lower boost clocks. So yeah, the M4 Pro as an SoC will use probably about as much power as this one does just for the CPU. The M4 Max will probably be more comparable. Again, it will still likely be a lot more efficient. But at least that one has up to 16 performance cores, and at least that one has 40 compute units, and at least that one actually has bandwidth built for such a large GPU. But look, in Cinebench, the M4 Pro is here. You can see how the scaling between the M4 Pro with 12 cores versus 14 cores. So this would be 8 performance, 4 efficiency cores. This would be 10 performance cores, 4 efficiency cores. Here you can see that the Ryzen AI Max actually loses in Cinebench to the 14 core version. Now they will point out, of course, that it wins against the 12 core version. I don't know why it's appropriate to compare 395 with a binned M4 Pro, but that's what they did. Then Blender Classroom. At this point, I'm probably having to assume that it's all CPU rendering. I have no idea why it's not written anywhere what they were actually testing. Please let me know. It should be noted, I don't mind the Ryzen AI Max 395 winning against the M4 Pro. That to me is one of the most natural things in the world. Like, even in terms of cooling, Apple puts in more cooling with the Max versions than the Pro chips. Maybe they compared like the Mac Mini here or something, because the Mini obviously doesn't come with Max. Regardless, so the Ryzen AI Max Plus 395. If it's a business chip, it will be the Ryzen AI Max Plus Pro 395. It wins in Blender Classroom. It wins in Corona. So basically, it does 3D rendering tasks, which would be, by the way, hilarious if they actually tested them with the CPU. And then V-Ray, I assume this is either GPU, or more likely this is some weird software thing, because as far as I know, most Mac users don't actually rely on V-Ray too much. So this is probably where just optimization comes into play. That being said, to me, what matters here is, for one, how stupid these benchmarks are. Overall, but also this suggests to me they are very, very frightened of the Max, which obviously, if we look at 3D rendering, now even with the CPU, you would get 2 more performance cores here, you would get higher TDP and stuff like that. Then you also have to account for the fact that the Max chip is in much, much more manageable laptops. That being said, when it comes to GPU, more than double the bandwidth on the M4 Max. This is where a lot of good stuff will come from. But overall, I'm still very happy that this chip exists. In fact, I would kind of be almost happier to have seen no comparisons with the M4 Pro and, well, I would have been okay with seeing M4 Max comparisons. Definitely not too fond of M4 Pro comparisons. So whatever is happening right now, the numbers aren't very important, and you can see that from AMD when in their keynote, when they were actually showing these slides specifically. Oh, by the way, it says a MacBook Pro M4 Pro. I'm sorry. I assume for a second it could have been the Mac Mini, but that was just my mind farting. It's all so much to take in over just 2 and 3 days. And CES is still going on, so it's not like I can just focus on the AMD stuff. Then there's NVIDIA stuff, there are laptops being announced and shit like that. Yeah, so the comparison to the M4 Pro to me here is not very important, to be honest, but I would love to see like real world difference, benchmark differences once the chip is actually out. Maybe once after a while it has gotten a few bug fixes, some optimizations, maybe even from developers. And obviously, I can promise you it will be a better gaming chip, not because it actually has a faster GPU or it's more efficient, but just because the compatibility level of Windows x86 versus Apple Silicon Max with games is a lot better. Graphics performance in the class of its own. So this is again comparing to Ultra Lake, which again, this is what leads me to believe that these were CPU tests. Still have no idea why you would ever do 3D rendering on CPUs these days, because they do specifically call out like graphics. Now, granted, this is more gaming focused stuff. Those are all benchmarks, by the way, not real games. And also, by the way, fuck fuck AMD here a little bit, which is like average 1.4 times faster graphics. We do have uplifts here, so like 1.4x is do they mean it adds 1.4x because that would line up, but that's not how you say 1.4 times faster. This would be basically just a 40% increase. So this is the average, which if it's actually 40% average, then doing these charts is very misleading. And this leads us also to, but I guess that's what they mean here, because here they have uplifts where it's 360%, right? So that's an extra 260%. So when they say it's 2.6 times faster, I assume they mean it adds 2.6x of already a 1x baseline. That's not how words work, by the way, AMD. Like this could, to me, 2.6 times faster means this would show this would show 260%, but whatever. Like 3D rendering here is up to 4 times faster, and graphics here are up to 2.5 times faster. These are charts where I honestly have to say, like, for one, it seems all very quickly done. Like, for a chip that's so supposedly focused on gaming, right? Not to say, obviously, it does have productivity benefits, especially with its unified memory, but really? Like, come on. Like, you could have mentioned so much more. You could have worded it so much better. And at this point, like here, even here, they say AMD claims 1.4 times faster graphics and 2.6 times faster rendering, including a whopping 402 faster performance in Blender Classroom. So you can see that this is how anybody who knows English is analyzing that, where to them 2.6 times faster is not even close to 400%. So therefore it deserves a special mention that something was actually 4 times faster. So I'm just completely baffled by the wording, the way this was announced. This was basically them saying, you know what, a couple of laptops are coming out with it, and then enjoy those laptops, right? But the actual keynote was complete ass. And I guess they cut out the RDNA 4 part, which would have been Lisa Su, because she wasn't there. So again, this isn't to shit on the actual final product, because I do understand why a lot of people, because currently on the x86 space, the only way to get 3 nanometer parts is Intel's Arrow Lake, which obviously has its own problems. And they Intel, to their defense, they did announce big Arrow Lake for mobile, but given like how much ground AMD has gained over Intel in recent years, I think a lot of people are looking for AMD laptops these days, and I just wish all of it was a lot clearer. Again, so these claims, they will have to be like verified by reviews. The range is incredibly large, so I assume there are different bottlenecks being hit across different tests. Some might be memory bandwidth limited. Some might just not like only 40 compute units or shit like that. Whether or not it actually beats the M4 family, I mean, we could compare it to the base M4, right? And then it wins almost everything except for efficiency and single core performance. But then once we move up to the M4 Pro, there will be probably trading some blows in CPU, winning mostly in GPU. And then with the M4 Max, I would assume this would be losing most comparisons. Yeah, that's about it for the Ryzen AI Max. I could go to LTT's video about the bad branding of the Strix Halo series, but that being said, they do have a video, I actually haven't yet watched it, explaining the new Dell family. So before we do that, I think it's very important to actually look into the NVIDIA announcements that we have gotten thus far. And then we can actually check out Linus and see, maybe today we can really praise him, because this definitely is a little bit more his forte, like live coverage of big events. He obviously gets really good access to the manufacturers that present stuff over there. And as much as I complain about stuff like branding, ultimately, once you have a device in front of you, it doesn't matter too much. And to me, the most interesting part here will be actually like seeing the efficiency. Does a huge SoC on Windows actually give you a big advantage over running dedicated GPU? Obviously, any dedicated GPU right now that you would be looking at would be now GDDR7 RTX 5000, or very cheap RTX 4000, which at that point is a little bit less comparable. That would make the bandwidth of the Ryzen AI Max pretty low at 256. But yeah, we'll have to see like final results. So at this point, I cannot tell you what it means for AMD versus NVIDIA or AMD versus Apple. For the most part, I can tell you that for AMD versus Intel, those are pretty good news, because Intel just isn't up to snuff right now, unfortunately. So let's get to the really big stuff, less so maybe for this channel, so we might not cover it as extensively, but this is the big stuff in the gaming world right now. The RTX 5000 series, including the 5090, that is $2,000. They promising twice the performance of the 4090. I'll briefly explain why that is bullshit. And then they also have the RTX 5080, the 5070 Ti, and the 5070, where they claim that they offer RTX 4090 level performance for just $550. And I will also explain why that's bullshit as well. The RTX 5090, as I already explained, is a $2,000 behemoth. The RTX 5080 is the most cut down 80 series ever. It is literally half of the 5090 in basically every aspect. Like compute counts, it has slightly faster than half of memory bandwidth. It has a 256-bit bus versus 512-bit bus. It has half the memory of 16 versus 32 gigabytes and stuff like that. Then the 5070 Ti is basically a worse 5080, but at least it still has 16 gigabytes of memory. And then we get at 750, and then at 550 we get to the 5070 with 12 gigs of memory, which again, you can argue whether or not that's an acceptable amount of memory for a GPU in 2025. Don't forget that at a similar price, you can now get a Mac Mini with 16 gigabytes of unified memory that is usable across the CPU and GPU. And of course, you get a full computer with that. Now, obviously, with a lot less GPU power. But when we are talking about a package deal, right, like, for example, I really have no problem with the 5070 Ti at 750. It will obviously be way faster than the PS5 Pro at 700, but a PS5 Pro at 700 has the same amount of memory, some of it being occupied by the system itself, so it actually will have a little bit less usable memory. It has 2 terabytes of fast PCIe 4 storage already included. It is a full system, right? So you don't even have to make sure you have something to put this into. It has its CPU, not the greatest, but it's more than doable for most games at 60 FPS. It comes with a controller, an HDMI cable, all that stuff. It has a very easy to use operating system. So while obviously I'm not going to say console users get this because this isn't a bad deal, nor will I say, oh, PC users get a PS5 Pro because it's such a better package, I will have to say, like, these prices are not terrible. The 5080 honestly isn't bad by NVIDIA standards either. They can afford to price it this way because AMD is not giving us high-end RDNA for this generation. And in terms of AI performance, which obviously plays into DLSS capabilities and RT capabilities, this will be far better than a 7900 XTX, which is AMD's now last gen flagship, even though technically it still is the flagship. And RTX 5090, honestly, if your workflow needs it or you're just a baller, I mean, it's literally 2 times 5080 for 2 times money, which in this space isn't bad. Usually it suffers a lot from diminishing returns. So this definitely looks better than the 4000 series, but this also begs like, we really need a card that is like $1299 and gets us 85% there to the 5090. But NVIDIA knows that, and maybe with like 24 gigs of RAM rather than 32. But NVIDIA knows that that would probably become more popular than the 5090, eat away at their margins. So this is why they made the heavily cut down 5080. NVIDIA cites up to 125 shader T-flops, 380 ray tracing T-flops, and 4,000 AI tops for the Blackwell family. This is interesting because the max tops rating for the 5090 is 3,400, somewhere between 3,300 and 3,400. So my assumption is that this is for the uncut die, because yes, believe it or not, with how huge the 5090 is and with how many transistors and cores it offers, this is actually not the fully enabled die. It's cut down. The fully enabled ones will go into the server industry, to their AI customers and stuff like that. Presumably the top GPU configuration with 92 billion transistors. Oh, exactly. So maybe I should have read the article. I just read a lot of other articles, but I found this one to be a good summary. For comparison, the RTX 4090 has just over 82 FP32 shaders, so that would be here a 50% improvement for the full die, not for the actual 4090, 5090, and that's 92 billion transistors versus 76. So this is the lineup that we have right now. One surprise of the announcement was actually to even see the 5070 Ti in the 5070 right now. I kind of almost expected them to delay them until like March or April or something like that. But I guess they really decided to come out guns blazing and shoot their load at AMD and tell them, you know what, now you have to match that. So RTX 5090, huge 512-bit bus, 32 gigabytes of GDDR7. RTX 5080, exactly half that, but the memory is a little bit faster clocked, so that leads you to a little bit more than half the memory bandwidth. I have no idea why memory bandwidth isn't mentioned here. We have huge power consumption metrics suggesting or proving definitely that this is still a 4-nanometer design. 575 watts with a need for a 1,000-watt power supply unit for the 5090, 360 watts on the 5080 with the need for an 850-watt power supply. You see how everything scales here. Like most stuff is basically just halved on the 5080, not quite, and the 5080 makes up some of that with a little bit faster clocks, so it will probably be like 60% of the performance of the 5090, maybe like 70% in like 1080p. Probably like the scaling with the 5090 is just so large, it will just need like 4K, maybe like 5 or 6K to properly utilize these many transistors, these many cores. And then the 5070 Ti looks like a cut down 5080 here. 5070, that's a separate die, 192 bits. So thankfully still pretty high memory bandwidth thanks to the usage of GDDR7, which is roughly 50% faster than GDDR6 right now. Not quite that much versus GDDR6X, which was used on the higher end 4000 series. So, and it will be interesting to see just how much the bandwidth is getting here, right? So we do have like 80% improvements in memory bandwidth depending on the card. So it will be interesting to see if the scaling ever allows for actually 80% more performance in tasks that might have been memory limited in prior scenarios. Yeah, high prices. Actually, a pretty beautiful design. The reference card here from NVIDIA is actually just 2-slot, 2-fan GPU for the 5090, which is pretty crazy. They say they have a very like advanced like 3D cooler design in here. Gonna be interesting to see how loud it gets and potentially how hot the die gets inside. Whether or not like some already are promising are like huge, of course, 3-fan coolers with like 3.5 slots, huge GPUs. Yeah, but that's not too surprising. This consumes more power than the 4090 by like 20-25%, and the performance claims are actually in line with that. I'll get to it, but hey, at least NVIDIA kind of made a pretty sweet like cooler right out of the box. So, what are the performance claims here? This is where this is where Apple would get their ass absolutely spanked by anyone, but even their own hardcore fans for not including just more precise data on the graph. But apparently it's fine for NVIDIA. Now, they did specify a few things like DLSS settings and whatever, but obviously these are not one-to-one comparisons, specifically, well, except for this one, specifically because they promised a lot of new DLSS stuff. So whenever you see these kinds of like doubling of performance graphs or more, that's with the new DLSS 4 that allows for multi-frame generation. So previously on the RTX 4000, you could generate basically one frame between two other frames by using AI and by using vector data from the things that are being rendered. So it can predict like if you have put in the input like that the arm is going like that for the character, it can roughly estimate what the frame should look like, even though it hasn't even rendered it yet. Now it can render basically, that's a gross simplification, it can render 3 frames. So it can, instead of being half and half, it can be 25% real frames, 75% fake frames. Those frames are not real performance. They actually increase latency in many ways. So this is not performance. This is perceived fluidity at best. Real performance is here and to a degree here. Mainly when we're talking about like a generational uplifts, we're probably looking at like a 20, 25, 30% increase, maybe in some tests more like 40. Also, of course, depending on whether we're comparing 5090 to 4090, 5080 to 4080. Not all cards scale the same. The generational uplift on the 5090 is actually the largest. That's why it also got that price hike. But anybody who actually believes that it will like catapult their, like if you already have a 4090, to be honest, you might get excited for like multi-frame generation in DLSS 4, but your real world gains will actually be pretty small. And now you're paying for a card that consumes even more power. You're paying for a card that costs more. So unless you find ways to like utilize the AI performance maybe on the side or the extra memory, though there are better ways to leverage memory as well. Yeah, it's hard to really recommend to anybody who already has a 4090. If you have a 3090, it's probably gonna almost double your performance in certain RT scenarios than just DLSS when it comes to just like quality, not frame gen. Obviously, even the 30 gen didn't even had frame gen, but even just DLSS upscaling is also faster. So that's a multi-generation leap. And when you compare it, obviously, to like the 20 series, now we have massive efficiency gains accumulated from all those different node jumps. We have all the architectural improvements to the AI cores, to the RT cores. You have a lot more memory. Like the peak with the 20 series was like the 2080 Ti with 11 gigabytes. This now being almost 3 times as much memory. Yeah. And then they even bring up like some generative AI tasks right here, because how could NVIDIA not mention stuff like that? The 5080 here in Far Cry actually also has a nice uplift. Then a very similar uplift. I couldn't tell you honestly how much exactly that is in Blacktail Requiem. And then you have all that bullshit when it comes to fake frames. 5070 Ti, again, pretty much similar story across the board. For the most part, it seems like they are intent on giving you like a roughly 15 to 20% improvement in value. Whether it means keeping the same price and giving you 20% more performance, or increasing price but giving you roughly like 35 to 40% more performance. So you'll have to decide whether or not this is worth it to you. There are also like new encoders and decoders inside. There are promises of better compression, so you can actually utilize your memory smarter. Inside DLSS 4, there's not only multi-frame generation, but also improvements by switching from a computational neural network. What was the CNN called? I always forget it. What was this? What did the C stand for? Jesus. Do they have the word here? So they are switching to a transformer model. And before that, I always forget what it's called. DLSS CNN. Oh my God, it's going to give me like CNN. Doubles the parameter of the CNN. Yeah, it's just, I always just call it CNN. And I always forget. It's convolutional neural network, right? It's called an evolutional neural network. Okay, I remembered. Obviously, everything is computation, so it wouldn't make sense to call it a computational neural network. So they are switching from a CNN to a transformer model, and interestingly enough, they are also updating the older generations all the way up to the RTX 2000 series. One thing that sticks out here is, though, they say that this transformer model needs up to 4 times the compute. So while the AI capabilities are noticeably beefed up on the RTX 5000 series, and there's a lot of bandwidth to utilize it, and there's more memory, I really wonder what that means for the RTX 2000 and 3000 series. Like, is that transformer model, even though obviously they promise a lot higher image quality, potentially too demanding here, where it will actually eat up so much of the internal bandwidth and stuff like that, that it will actually might be better to just go back to a CNN or even run natively? I don't know. This might be like a little bit of a planned obsolescence thing where they're, oh, look, we give you much better image quality if you're like using a 2080 Ti to go from 1080p to 4K. But at that point, you might as well just render at 1440p, because so much of the internal resources are eaten up by this more intense transformer model. Regardless, it's being used for ray reconstruction, which was DLSS 3.5, super resolution, DLLA. DLLA is when you basically use native resolution DLSS, and then you can just use it as an anti-aliasing method. You're not doing really any kind of upscaling. scaling. And yeah, of course, that power can also be utilized for all kinds of AI stuff and shit like that. RTX 5090 available on January 30th together with the 5080. And then sometime in February, the 5070 Ti and 5070 will hit the markets. So a lot of interesting stuff. This is honestly, there is one thing that really sticks out to me, even more so than with the Ryzen AI Max Plus things and stuff like that. And that is simply that the power consumption metrics are really, really huge. Now, I'm not saying it's not worth it, especially in the desktop space. You can basically think, by the way, of like the mobile parts as like an RTX 5090 mobile is basically an RTX 5080 desktop, just with more memory by using higher density GDR7 memory modules. I've seen power consumptions even for the RTX 5080 mobile, which is more of a 5070 Ti desktop, be like in the 150 plus 175 watt range. So I don't even want to promise an exact wattage. Like, it's crazy how high it goes. I know that technically it's like 150 watts is sort of the official max in some way, but manufacturers are allowed to boost further. So you never know how hard a mobile RTX 5000 series will hit your GPU unless you get a model that like really hardcore limits its power consumption, maybe just because the cooling wouldn't be able to handle more, or you set like some power limit yourself in the BIOS, which I don't like playing around with the BIOS of a laptop, but hey, some people do. So yeah, the mobile parts here are crazy power hungry potentially for very little gains, like relatively. Like, sure, you do get those 20, 25, 30% improvements for like 20% more power. But don't forget, the RTX 4000 series is over 2 years old at this point. So this would be one of the smallest efficiency gains almost ever in the history of NVIDIA, which again, yeah, the 30 series wasn't too great over the 2000 series, but that's because they randomly switched to Samsung's 8 nanometer node, which is garbage. Yeah, so this is where I get really pissed off about the lack of 3 nanometer. Don't forget, the M3 generation was already 3 nanometer. The M3 generation already gave you hardware accelerated ray tracing, mesh shading. It gave you pretty good AI performance, even though, yes, the TOPS count official isn't very high, but it had a decent amount of memory bandwidth and stuff like that, especially for what it is, right? A mobile part. But we already have now for quite a bit the M4 series. So this is where the mobile parts of these chips, like they would probably have to play around a lot with the boost clocks, because efficiency loss usually happens mostly when you basically overspin the silicon in the most stupid way. So running it at a lower frequency, even like 10% lower, maybe closer to like 2.2, 2.3 gigahertz boosts, and then like 1.8 to 2 gigahertz base, maybe even just 1.6 in some ways, could be the way to leverage it. I don't know, obviously, if the power consumption curve has changed noticeably for the 50 series. We at least know that for peak power consumption, the efficiency looks pretty similar to the 40 series, which for a generation that is over 2 years away from the last one, that's a little bit disappointing, at least to me. Yeah, but that's about it for the RTX 5000 and what AMD has announced. I will be covering over the week. I am taking a hiatus this weekend, so I'll try to stream on Thursday and hopefully on Friday as well. Tomorrow, I actually don't know. It's either tomorrow or Thursday. So write that in your calendar. That's super clear schedule, guys. but I'll cover stuff like the laptop 5000 series. So, but for now, we are done with the big announcements. Took us about half an hour per news, which isn't too bad. So, but I would like to cover something that to me has been the most egregious example of like rebranding and honestly almost like customer deception, because or just like a spit in the face, I would argue. And that is Dell has rebranded their entire lineup. They are now calling shit Pro and Pro Max left and right. So they are very, very much following the moniker of the Apple silicon chips, not even the laptops. Apple obviously has like a MacBook Pro, but Apple doesn't have a MacBook Pro Max or anything. They have a MacBook with a Max chip or a Pro chip. They don't even combine those names. Over Max, you get the Ultra. So, they probably wanted to make it complicated so it looks a little bit less like they're stealing Apple's naming scheme. But yeah, they were laughed at even during their presentation, basically. And Linus, I have not actually gotten to watch this video, but he has a pretty good relationship with Dell. So I assume they just gave him access to all the laptops. We're going to see what chips they're running. I know some of them would be running the larger laptop Arrow Lake chips, which is up to 24 cores with 8 performance and 16 e-cores. So we're basically looking at desktop Arrow Lake in a laptop, which will not be a good thing, but yeah, let's see.
Dell just revamped basically their entire lineup of PCs, including a complete rebrand. Inspiron, gone. XPS, gone. Latitude, gone. Alienware, stays.
Yeah.
But that's about it. And Dell sponsored this video to run you guys through the new branding and what it means. We've also got the new devices, and they look sick. But first, I want to explain this graphic. On the left are all of the old names that Dell used to use to specify the target segment of their PCs. Here's your basic consumer models, here's your step up with more premium materials, here's your workplace workhorse, and here's your high performance workstation.
Yeah, this is where I would say their branding always has been garbage. The XPS branding has been really confusing in that regard, precisely because of these like intersections that he's showing, where latitude and precision branding sort of like sometimes cover the things that XPS does. The fact that XPS ever also had anything to do with desktop is just insulting to me. Like, for the vast majority of people, XPS just meant, honestly, they're thin and light laptops, which honestly was never true, but that's how most people saw it. In all honesty, what they should have done is they should have kept the XPS branding, just use it for their thin and lights, which is already the association that most people have, where it's anything from like a MacBook Air competitor to like a MacBook Pro up to like Pro chip competitor, not quite Max. And then like found one branding for higher end parts. And then for desktops, who the F buys like pre-built laptops, pre-built desktops outside the business space? And even there, I would argue like one branding is enough. Just give us like plus and premiums, whatever there. And then for all the gamers, just keep it to Alienware, in my opinion. Like XPS and Alienware, and to a lesser degree G series, I guess, Inspiron for the cheaper ones, but I'm looking for the more premium stuff. Are you by far your most recognizable brandings? I guess that's why Alienware is the one that sticks around. But XPS probably just wasn't like compatible with the replacement for this mess. So I understand why they want to do it. But man, it's such a slap in the face of ever trying to learn any of this. It's exhausting.
Oh yeah, and over here's gaming. Okay, now we take that and we just put it here. Here are the 3 new categories. Dell is what most consumers will be looking for, and will cover many.
The problem with Dell branding is like that's not really how it works, right? Like, are you talking about the Dell Tower or a Dell laptop here already, right? So again, I know their previous branding didn't do a good job of it, but at least when Samsung says Galaxy, I mostly understand we're talking about smartphones. Um, Jesus Christ, it's well, and tablets. Samsung also made their branding stupid over time. I know people will be like, "Oh, the iPhone Pro Max and whatever." I understand that, but that's because we are literally talking about one premium iPhone model with the distinction that it's a Pro, but it's basically the larger Pro. Making a family where Pro Max can apply to both desktops and laptops, it's
The
Jesus.
work, play, and school tasks. Dell Pro is for professionals, where security and productivity take center stage. And Dell Pro Max is for those professionals that really tax their computer and need the horsepower for massive calculations, simulations, and CAD models. And I can see how this could be a little confusing. Change always is. But one thing I appreciate about Dell's branding streamlining here is that words mean what they mean. For instance, Pro means that the machine is actually designed for professional use, not just that it costs.
Nah, I never cared about that. I think you can use almost any word for better, whether it's Pro or Plus or Premium, Deluxe, whatever. Just make it one consistent branding. Making Pro actually all about pros is actually confusing once you get to then the Pro Max, because I assume that a lot of their Pro Max devices would actually become pretty attractive to just like prosumers, not full-on pros, and even gamers who just wouldn't want to deal with the gaming aesthetics of like an Alienware laptop or something like that.
More and makes your blue bubbles even shinier. Of course, there are still more basic and more premium machines within each slice here.
Yeah.
So how do we differentiate those? Base, plus, and premium.
This is where honestly where I get so freaking annoyed, because now like, does that mean we could have a Pro Max Plus or Pro Max Premium? How much sense would it even has a Dell Pro Max base? Like, look, and I know we're specifically talking about pros here, so maybe the Pro Max are a little bit better, but adding words always is bad. It's already bad to have Pro Max, but that's kind of the limit, right? That was what we already discussed with the Ryzen AI Max Pro potentially, but then you get the Plus inside just for a moniker specifically for the 395 chip, even though the 395 already makes sure you know it's different from the 380 or 385 or the 390. I'm just confused to at what point will it ever make sense for any consumers to call something the Dell Pro Premium and understand that it's intrinsically better than the Dell Pro Max.
So, derivative? Yes. Easy for the average person.
I guess I can see that this is a sponsored video. Derivative being a very nice way of saying stolen from Apple and made more stupid. Oh my God, they actually do have a premium moniker of the Dell Pro Max family. Oh no, oh no. Oh my God, they will have something called a Dell Pro Max premium laptop. Please, please shoot me in a video game. Please, please shoot me in a video game. Jesus.
To understand? Also, yes, maybe. Let's try it out. I want a gorgeous laptop that I can pose with while I sip an expensive coffee. Okay, go.
Dell
What do you mean, like desktop? Wait. You want a wait, did he literally say the word premium?
Gorgeous
No, he said gorgeous. Gorgeous can mean a lot. Do you mean thin and light? Because at that point we were talking the basic Dell, so no Pros, no Pro Maxes. It would be a Dell premium laptop, I guess.
That I can pose with while I sip an expensive coffee. Okay, go.
Dell Premium.
Great. Now, I want a stable work laptop, but my workload is actually pretty light. Go.
Dell Pro.
I need a Dell Pro.
All right then. Without further ado, let's take a look at
The problem is that these words do not scale the way you think they do. That's the problem. like Pro and Premium, they're not like interchangeable to all people. Like, I guess if you really focus on Pro, meaning for pros, but they're PlayStation Pro consoles. They're AirPods Pro that don't even have a wired connection. Like, people have gotten used to just saying Pro is better. To them, Pro means the same as Max or Premium, and the scaling depends on the family of devices. Combining all those words together, I know, yes, if you really only focus on Dell and you specifically learn that lineup, it makes sense. But don't forget, each and every one of those laptops will then have their own chips inside and stuff like that. I liked XPS. I don't know why they changed
Some
it.
of the most exciting machines in our new lineup, starting with the Dell Pro 13 Premium, where Dell has turned around what I would consider to be one of their
You see, for example, I wouldn't have been able to call it. I would have called the Dell Pro Premium 13, right?
largest past mistakes. On the previous Latitude 9000 model that this replaces, for I/O, you got USB-C and
And that's perfection. Just USB-C, just as the world is supposed to be. Just delete that stupid 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. And yes, it's all USB-C. It's all good.
USB-C. But no more. Here we get USB-A, HDMI 2.1, two Thunderbolt 4 ports. Okay, those are kind of USB-C. But
You even cut down one of my USB-C ports for a stupid Type A. Yeah. You added HDMI, which I guess is nice. I mean, in 3 years of owning a MacBook Pro with an HDMI port, I've used it 2 times, and each time just to experiment with it, never out of necessity, which I guess could change. I have no idea. But HDMI isn't bad. Like, USB freaking A, like, come on. You're literally encouraging every peripheral maker with like every mouse and shit like that to still freaking ship it with USB A. And then when somebody actually ships you a C to C cable for stuff like that, or God forbid a C accessory, right? Like for a wireless mouse, like now you will be complaining, oh, it's taking up ports. Why do I have the USB-A port here? Well, because morons like you asked for it. We don't need Type A anymore. The problem with Type A versus something like HDMI just got upgraded, or their latest specification is confirmed, up to 96 gigabits per second, up to 16K resolutions, right? HDMI 2.2. We will have HDMI 3. We will have HDMI 4. It just at some point leverages faster internal bandwidth, and that's fine. USB-A is stuck. It's not getting any improvements. Thunderbolt 4, USB 4, Thunderbolt 5, USB 4 Gen 2, or whatever they call it. That's all USB-C. This is where the security enhancements are. This is where the performance enhancements are. This is where the faster charging is coming from. This is where things are getting standardized, where not only can, like, you can potentially send a lot of power, for example, through USB-A, but that's usually custom protocols. You can send up to 240 watts by default with like a Thunderbolt 5 port if you have a device that can handle that. Obviously, most will probably be 140 or 100 watts, but you could. A lot of cables that you buy these days for power for USB-C, they're complying with 100 watts, 140 watts, all the way up to 240 watts. You have Thunderbolt cables that some even in theory could support Thunderbolt 5 because they have so much bandwidth internally. They would just need to be leveraged fully, though I assume most Thunderbolt 4 cables will stay Thunderbolt 4 cables. But at least that's like 40 gigabits in every direction, even with Thunderbolt 4, USB 4. That's like no USB standard USB-A standard reaches that. And now Thunderbolt 5 doesn't just give you 80 gigabits in either direction, but you can even do 120 gigabytes in one direction. Like, Jesus, why are you fucking celebrating USB-A ports in 2025?
But you also get a headphone microphone combo jack, meaning,
I mean, you already had that headphone jack. I guess he didn't actually look at that image before that. Yeah, I vastly prefer this.
More. Okay, those are kind of USB, and having the sleekest Dell and being able to easily connect to the boardroom projector. But that isn't even the most exciting news for ports. In the entire Dell Pro lineup, every single laptop now gets replaceable USB-C ports. Wait, like serviceable?
Yeah.
Oh, that is so cool.
Okay, that's cool. That's one. I don't know why it's Pro exclusive, but okay.
Cool. We're gonna look at that more in a bit, but first, as the name suggests, everything about this laptop is premium. The chassis is magnesium.
Wait, is it a premium? Is it a Pro or a
Cut the
premium?
weight down to
Oh, it's
just
the Dell Pro 13 Premium, right?
over a kilogram. We've got their zero lattice keyboard, but
Yeah, I never liked those. I always preferred their, I guess their first gen like keyboards when they went like pretty thin with XPS like 5-6 years ago. And then I'm really a fan of the Surface keyboard. I think that's the only one that, in my opinion, definitively feels better in many ways than Apple's. On laptops, though, not obviously on their keyboard attachments for the Surface tablet.
with a tiny bit more space between the keys than what you would find on the XPS, and its 13-inch touchscreen display goes up to 500 nits at QHD Plus resolution. Although the screen we're most excited to check out is the QHD Plus tandem OLED panel that will be coming on the Pro Premium 14.
Please, please let it be a better tandem OLED than the bullshit 60 hertz, 450 nits something of the previous generation, which at that point might as well not be tandem OLED. And again, the problem with the word tandem OLED is Apple very, very definitively for themselves staked out tandem OLED is basically two OLED panels, quote unquote, put in a row. So you have two layers of light emitters, a high boost to energy efficiency from it, potentially a big boost to longevity. Now, there are other ways to stack multiple layers of light emitting technology. Primarily, you can do not only so behind each other, but also next to each other. When you look, for example, at Samsung's latest QD OLED devices and stuff like that, they have like 3 or 4 layers of like deuterium for their subpixels and stuff like that. Usually, it seems like what Apple's approach is doing, it is probably the most expensive right now, but the one with the most benefits, where stacking things side by side seems to improve potentially like brightness and stuff like that, but doesn't really improve efficiency too much the way that Apple's tandem OLED approach does. But Apple's tandem OLED approach was literally not really that possible until recently. So yeah, I just hate that the word tandem OLED is used outside of Apple's branding at all. Like, I wish that other companies just put some other branding on it so I would know, oh, you stack two panels basically behind each other. Like, have a name for that. Oh, you're just using a modern thing that has like a lot of like what Samsung is doing for their QD OLED stuff. Have a separate name for that because the benefits there are a little bit different. So yeah, it's a mess.
Later this year. One more thing that professionals will appreciate.
Also, by the way, what the actual F are these bezels? Why are we dealing with MacBook Pro 2015 bezels just because it's a Pro device? Also, is this a 16:9 aspect ratio? This does not look good. At least it looks glossy, so it's not a matte display, but it looks like a glossy display with a terrible anti-reflective coating.
It is that the Dell Pro Plus and Premium can be equipped with a 5G modem,
Yeah.
allowing you to work from
That's
anywhere without worrying that the coffee shop Wi-Fi might be as insecure as 15-year-old Linus. This is what happens when I don't review the script before we shoot. Now let's have a look at the Pro Plus model, where we find some very thoughtful cost cutting. You still get access to great performance with an Intel Core Ultra 7 with an NPU for AI, and later in the year there's going to be some AMD Ryzen models coming, but gone.
Why later? Okay. I guess that's also like Dell and Intel are pretty close, so I guess Intel just gets first pass.
Is the more expensive magnesium chassis, and here is a
Really? You're gonna make a magnesium chassis for a device that looks
more
like this?
reasonable aluminum one.
Oh, okay. So it's the pros with the magnesium. But really, you have a magnesium chassis for a device with those thick bezels?
Cam gets downgraded from 8 megapixel to 5 megapixel, but you still have the option for Windows Hello facial recognition and a fingerprint reader on the power button. For the most part, you can configure the laptop to be just as powerful as a premium model, but if you want to save a bit, you can forego things like Wi-Fi 7 or 5G connectivity. And for the 13-inch, the screen tops out at a 1200p resolution. That's still really good at this size. Moving on to the Dell Pro, this is the base model.
It's not bad. It's not
Retina
Retina level, but it's not bad.
Downgraded a little bit. Now we get a plastic chassis. The touchpad is also a touch smaller.
Wait, what is it?
Now we get a plastic. You can see that once again the materials
Wait,
have been down.
that's the differentiation inside the freaking Pro lineup? You're making plastic Pros? Why is it just part of the Dell basic shit?
Downgraded a little bit. Now we get a plastic chassis. The touchpad is also a touch smaller, and although the processor is still the greatest,
And that's a disgusting matte finish on the screen.
it isn't the latest. In the Dell Pro 14-inch, we've got an Intel Core 7 250U, which you might have noticed doesn't have the Ultra branding of the laptops we just talked about.
Oh yeah, sure.
But you do get more upgradability. Let's see who can take apart their laptop first. Phillips screws, love to see it. Are these all captive?
Yeah.
That's great. It makes it so much harder to lose screws, which is the bane of every IT tech's existence when you're working on things like laptops and smartphones that just have all these custom stupid length screws and everything. I need yours.
I win.
Alex, we weren't racing.
You literally just said it was a race when you had a lead on me.
We're not racing anymore. GG. Wow, you can really see that as similar as they look from the outside, they are not that similar when you get to the inside. A lot of the space
I thought they smelled bad on the outside.
in the premium model is taken up by that 5G modem, dual fans to keep noise to a minimum, and even a sideways SSD because there's so much stuff packed in. We've also got, oh, that is so cool, these replaceable USB-C port modules. That is so cool. I mean, it's the I/O.
I mean, it's not bad, but is it really so cool? Like, there are different levels of excitement that I feel like you should be showing to kind of to stuff like this, where you're like, man, that's really good for the environment and for self-repair parts. That being said, also, like, after years and years of devices with lightning ports and USB-C ports, like, the only device where I've ever heard a port over time, I don't even know what exactly happened, was my iPhone 7 Plus, where sometimes the lightning port is a little iffy on if it's going to connect to every lightning cable, right? Obviously, that's not good, and a good way to replace that is obviously good, but it happened like after close to a decade of ownership, so yeah, I'm not going to repair it at this
port
point.
that you're going to use the most, especially because it's going to be where you're plugging in for charging, where, you know, mishaps can happen. So being able to pop them out with just 2 screws without also replacing the rest of the board, I love it. I mean, it's still a fair bit of work because the screws are on the other side, so you got to kind of pull the motherboard out. But dude, this is progress. It's the sort of thing that I would invest in. Meanwhile, in the Dell Pro, things are a bit more laid back with a single fan, allowing for a simpler PCB
Man,
design.
that internal design looks so freaking ass, but I know that's it's not really what counts, but man, like, when you look at the MacBooks from the inside, this just looks so terrible.
And very welcome support for SODIMM memory with 60.
And by the way, if you some of you have asked in the past, will Apple consider something like SODIMM memory? Or a QDIM or shit like that? Like, look at this size. Does it look like something that Apple would adopt, especially outside the desktop? Like, I could see them doing like QDIM on like a Mac Pro potentially, just without adding more bandwidth, but maybe just to literally double the max memory. But like, yeah, that is not going into an Apple laptop. I'm sorry. This is more like they like put like their storage on like 8 connectors all over the board to make them pretty and symmetrical and to take up as little space in one place as possible, they're not doing this to their memory.
4 gigs currently installed. Maybe you want all that RAM though, and the latest processors and upgradability? Well, then we need to stop looking at these Pros and switch over to the Pro Max. We'll look at the outside of this bad boy in a second, but this
Angelica, welcome to the stream. Also, a happy new year to you and to everyone else.
the Dell Pro Max 14, and it is one of the first laptops to hit the market with LP cam memory. We made a full video on this stuff.
It's LP cam. I always forget what it's. There's so many freaking names at this point. I'm getting so confused.
2 years ago when Dell pioneered this standard.
Wait,
but
no, LP cam is for like desktop memory, right? QDIM is the one where you can put LPDDR5X on it and stuff like that, right? QDIM? It's written like that, I believe. QDIM. Is it that? So, blah, 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 blah. And what did
the
he call it
we
here?
made a full video on this stuff 2 years ago.
LP cam, okay. LP cam. Cam RAM. Compression attached module. Jesus Christ, like LPDDR5X Samsung laptop module. Which one was it? It's going to tell me just about the memory and not the actual, like... Yeah, that's not external. Upgradable? RAM mods. No, it's LP cam memory. That's what they are talking about. It's so interesting. Oh yeah, it just looks different, I guess. 60% smaller than SODIMMs. Okay, whatever. Okay, I'll try to remember this branding.
Ago when Dell pioneered this standard. But the TL didn't watch is that cam memory allows for higher memory density and, more importantly, lower memory profile while also getting replaceable modules close enough to the CPU, shortening the traces enough that they can run at very high speeds. In real world terms, that means that while our replaceable SODIMMs are running at 5,200 megatransfers per second, our CAM module is running at 7,467 megatransfers.
Is it, what memory is this exactly? Oh, it's LPDDR5. Okay, good to know. That's actually very usable. Thank you.
Per second. And that is while maintaining upgradability. So cool. In this area here, we can see where an NVIDIA RTX 500 class GPU can be optioned, what previously would have been called a Quadro, and below that, we've got an impressively sized 72 watt-hour battery. That's a nice size for a 14-inch machine.
It's the exact same capacity as the Apple's 14-inch.
All of them except for the Pro Max Premium, which for whatever reason is Torx. But we'll look at that in a bit.
In fairness to them, Torx is more better. It's just not always convenient because I don't always have one on me. Although I probably should, thanks to my LTT precision driver and bit set with magnetic parts tray, detachable, LTTstore.com. Moving to the outside of this machine, we've got another solid selection of I/O with 3.5mm audio, USB-A, and Ethernet. 2 Thunderbolt 4s, more USB-A, and HDMI.
I always hate these sloppy, like wobbly Ethernet things. Covers, like if they are built high quality, yeah, but they always wear out so fast. Like my old Windows laptop, which was like a premium one, had that, and it just was a nightmare over time.
This is a base model, but it's the base Pro Max, so we still get a Quad HD Plus display.
Okay, so I guess you can have a Pro Max and just really save up by them selling you like a plastic chassis on a Pro Max device, even though at that point you could probably use a relatively high quality aluminum or magnesium chassis to also help with dissipation and also to protect your relatively premium components. And also, like, what cost saving are you really enacting if you, like, I assume, put in a nice screen, but then one with such bezels on a Pro Max.
And Windows
Ugh.
Hello facial recognition, but the thing that impressed me most about this laptop is actually the quality of the keyboard. This is far from a thin laptop, and Dell has clearly used that space to allow for one of the most desktop-like keyboards that we've encountered in quite some time. The travel is long, the key stability is great, and a fair bit of force is required to actuate them, making for a very satisfying typing
Okay,
experience.
I
Enough
guess
of this,
that's
though.
not bad.
Let's look at the big boy. The new Dell Pro Max 16 Premium. On the left, we get HDMI and 2 Thunderbolt 5 ports.
Yep,
Which
so I guess this must be an Arrow Lake device.
feature double the throughput of Thunderbolt 4. Then on the right, we get 3.5mm audio. Oh my goodness, we still get Thunderbolt 4? Yes, we do. And a full-sized SD card reader, which I'm sure many camera operators and video editors are gonna love to hear.
Well, I honestly, that's something I've heard like 5 years ago, but over, like, as most people have transitioned to 4K and higher quality codecs and stuff like that, and got new cameras obviously with them, I've heard that a lot of people just switch to like different standards and even just like transfer stuff over USB-C directly from their camera.
We're not entirely sure what the exact specs are for this guy. Dell said that they might actually change between now and the planned release later this year. But we do know that this display is QHD+, it's touch, and it is freaking fantastic looking. Finally, it's time to look at the consumer side of things. It's gonna be a bit confusing for a little while. See, Dell is renaming their laptops as they are releasing new ones, meaning that the current consumer lineup is going to be Inspiron, then Dell Plus, and then finally XPS. But as the lower Inspirons get replaced, then they'll get turned into just Dell laptops, and XPS will be rebranded to Dell Premium. If you ever find this confusing and you're wondering which ones are the old ones and which ones are the new ones just say Dell, and the old ones say Dell with a circle. Let's
Jesus
take a look
Christ.
at the new Dell Plus 16
They
and 16
changed
2 in
even
1.
that
The
for
real
no
highlight
reason.
here is the QHD Plus mini LED touchscreen that goes up to 600 nits peak brightness and has a 90 Hz refresh rate. Dell also has continued this new trend of including USB-A and HDMI in addition to USB-C. This guy will be available February 18th, starting at $999.
Nice.
Moving forward, all Dell laptops are going to have a 7-digit model number that tells you the category, tier, form factor, shipping year, and CPU vendor, putting all the
Jesus
important info in one
Christ.
place. Just like it's important for me to thank Dell for sponsoring this video.
Jesus, once you need that kind of freaking decoder for it, yeah, you know you done fucked up in some ways. It's not like the new branding is absolutely terrible, but I just don't like... I think the only reason why I'm angry is because the XPS branding wasn't bad. It's everything around the XPS branding. And the fact that the XPS branding has to go away because in order to delete the other shit, you also kind of have to delete XPS alongside it. Yeah, it's a shame. The laptops themselves, hard to really tell. No real big promises or anything here. So I've talked about AMD, I talked about NVIDIA. Obviously, you will see those chips and graphics cards and GPUs inside these kinds of laptops. I'll keep covering it. Let's even just look at if PC Gamer has anything new to cover. I don't know if I've missed anything that was potentially released today, but thankfully it hasn't. So we will cover more as more stuff comes out. Again, don't know if I can stream tomorrow or the day after that, but I will let you know as usual on Twitter and a couple of hours in advance here on YouTube. Hopefully you enjoyed this content. I know it's been a while since I was here. Thanks to everyone for joining. Last shout out to all the YouTube jazz. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it out to anybody who think might enjoy it, and comment, now not live, but afterwards. That helps with the algorithm. And as always, you can become a channel member right here on YouTube. Shout out to Angelica, Max, Maximus, and Steve. And you can also become a supporter over on Patreon. However you choose to support this channel, it's very much appreciated. And as always, let me know what you would like to see me cover next. I know this was a lot of different names and brandings and a lot of changes and a lot of non-Apple stuff. So hopefully in the next video, I'll also get to incorporate some of the smaller Apple news and rumors that I have missed in the last 2 weeks. But as always, I'm open to your suggestions. Thank you, and I'll see you guys next time. This is Mark Tech, tuning out.